Hello again, everyone. I'm Liz Rackman with Atlas Geosciences Northwest, and I want to welcome you all to our second Zoom event for the year, State of the South Sound Market. Before we go into our program, I want to thank all of our 2020 sponsors because we couldn't do we couldn't do these events without you. You help us make our mission successful. Olds Morrison Rinker Baker is our platinum sponsor. We have, for our gold sponsors, we have Bentall Green Oak, BN Builders, DPR Construction, Goodman Real Estate, Mortensen, Sellen, Skanska, Stokes Lawrence, Vulcan, and then our silver sponsors include BDO United States, CBRE, DCI Engineers, Foster Garvey, HCMP, Hermanson, Kennedy Wilson, Ryan Swanson, HITT, Shukart, Seco Development, Swinnerton, Unico, ZGF, and then thank you to our in-kind sponsors, Middle of Six, The Registry, Washington Holdings, and Zara Photo. We have some more virtual events coming up. If you want more details on events, these two events and some others that we have already planned, go ahead and check out the crewseattle.org website for more information and registration information. Now is the time for membership renewal for 2021 for Crew. And if you join now, you will get the remainder of 2020 included with your 2021 fees at no additional cost. Remember to like us on your social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And a special thank you to the South Sound Crew Committee for putting this presentation together. Wendy Gall, myself, Melissa Culver, Sean Harju, Pooja Freeman, Janet Matsky, Natalie Shiro, Lysandra Taylor, and Nellie Tranold. We have some Zoom housekeeping items for you guys before we get started. All participants are automatically muted. Your video is off. You are able to raise your hand and the Q&A is enabled and encouraged. We also have the chat enabled for this one. Go ahead and ask questions using the Q&A button, however, instead of the chat, and go ahead and upvote questions you like by using a thumbs up. And at this point, I will turn it over to Natalie Shiro with Chicago Title, who is moderating our panel, and she will introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Liz. So we have a wonderful panel for you all today. So I would like to introduce you to Vanessa Herzog, SIOR CCIM Principal at Lee & Associates, Will Frame, Senior Vice President and Shareholder for Kidder Matthews, and Carrie Walker, Vice President at First Western Properties. Thank you all for joining us today. Video's on. There you are. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in, and really to get this started, we want to know 2020. What's been happening? You know, how did it start out for you this year? What did you guys see during quarantine or when our first lockdown happened? And kind of how do you see 2020 ending up and going into 2021? So Will, I'll go ahead and start with you.
All right, afternoon, everyone. Again, Will Frame here in the Kidder Matthews Tacoma office. Myself and my brother, Drew Frame, we're the office and healthcare specialist team here for Kidder Matthews. So when I'm talking to you guys, it'll be from an office or healthcare perspective. 2020 started out really well. The outlook was extremely strong, both leasing and investment perspective, but most of 2020 has obviously been through this COVID environment. And so I guess South Sound 2020 in a nutshell, we've done a lot better than I think a lot of people would anticipate in February or March. Tacoma and the South Sound has actually performed a lot better than, let's say, Seattle. State Farm, in comparison, when State Farm left the market in 2018, that is still more of an effect than the COVID actually has been in 2020. So I'd say that the outlook is far more positive than people would think. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, so there will be some bumps over the next couple of years, but all in all, the office market, if you would have told me in March, we've done a lot better than expected. Quick anecdote: the building that I'm in now, that we did the leasing on, we actually raised our rent $1. Now that's very small segment in Class A market, but in Class A in downtown Seattle, where the rates are expected to significantly dip, we're actually raising our rent slightly here in Tacoma.
Great, thank you. Vanessa, how has your 2020 been?
Well, very interesting. COVID on the industrial side had a very different impact. At the end of 19, we were kind of wondering if we were going to see a little drop off of industrial, because the demand had been very strong and for such a long period of time that we thought, okay, when is this cycle going to end? And it just kept going. What COVID did is it just jump started it all over again. And so the demand for land on which to build buildings, the demand for buildings in which to put tenants has just been off the charts. So it's been very interesting. What COVID did is it finally pushed e-commerce right into mainstream. And so that's really what's happening. And I'm anticipating that to continue for quite some time.
Great, thank you. Carrie?
So the year started out strong, probably the best market since 2006. We had a ton of leasing momentum, especially with grocery anchored centers. There was more demand than supply. Couldn't hardly find space for your tenants, especially if you were talking on the east side. I mean, there was just no vacancy. So this definitely slowed down that momentum. And I would say that it wasn't a slow change. It was a overnight change. So it was kind of a shock. The first couple months of the shutdown was scary. Obviously retail is dramatically affected. The last few months have started to pick back up, and I think we were all still kind of feeling hopeful. And then obviously Monday changed things. So we'll see how the end of the year shakes out. But overall, things are starting to move again. I'm busy. I'm just as busy as I was at the beginning of the year, just different kind of busy. I have a lot of clients that are now taking advantage of the market and getting into markets they weren't able to get into before, because we are starting to see a little bit more vacancy coming available. And then being the end of the year, people are now looking for 2021, 2022 pipelines. So we're starting to see the momentum pick back up and people realizing that this is the new and how do we pivot and move forward. So definitely different. I would have had a completely different story if COVID had not happened. This would probably been the best year most of us would have had in our careers. But it's been interesting to see how it's affected us. And one, as opposed to the beginning of the year and now, I'm finding in commercial, there's a lot more use of social media. I think people took the last 4 months to start building their social media presence. So you're starting to see more LinkedIn presence and more Instagram and other media aspects, which will be interesting on how that continues to change the business next year. So.
Wonderful, thank you. So Will, I'm going to go back to you. Just talk a little bit more about the office, especially in the Tacoma South Sound area. There's been a lot of talk of people working from home, permanently, or maybe going part-time to the office or doing some kind of hybrid. What are you hearing in the market?
Yeah, most of my clients or tenant rep clients, we are shifting our business. I would say 75% of the groups that we work with, they're shifting in some form or fashion, and 75% of that 75% is downsizing, because the work from home has been a success. And it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but kind of the general theme is that you as a company can move a department or two into a work from home environment, and cut your square footage down from 25-50% of what it was, and that saves you a few $100,000 a year, which right now everyone needs that capital because they're light on capital. So it's like a little bit of an extra boost to go along with the PPP money that you got, is if you can potentially cut your square footage or cut your rent. I think the recovery time has really a lot to do with this work from home concept, if not the most prevailing point of concern. And reason being is most of the deals we're doing right now are renewals, and those renewals are literally 1 to 2 years in length, with groups that are always comfortable in doing a 5 to 10 year renewal. So I think the recovery is probably 12 to maybe even 36 months out. So I think the recovery in the office market will be slower than people might expect. It's not just going to be like a light switch, like when the shutdown happened. The shutdown was pretty instant, like Carrie alluded to. The recovery is going to be longer because these short-term leases are usually signed in an as-is square footage in a space that's too big for them. So people haven't really started downsizing until their lease comes up, which is a year to 2 years from now. So if you're a group of 15,000 feet, you just renewed for a year from now, you're now in 10,000 feet. And so we didn't feel that COVID effect until a year later with that tenant. That's going to happen more than not. So I think we're actually pretty early into the recovery. And it could be just a phase 7-8 years from now, those same groups that wanted to downsize by 25% go, okay, the work from home was cool and all for 5 years, but let's go back and get more space. Our company's grown and we still value the in-office work environment. So this all could just be a trend that's over before the end of the decade. But again, it's a slower recovery than I think people would expect.
Sure. Now, I know a lot of the things I've been listening to, they're talking about, we just need to restructure, we need to change the space, we need to allow, for people to have a little more personal space. Are you seeing any of that where they're maybe getting rid of some, common areas that they had built up and going back to more, traditional offices?
Yeah. What you're seeing is it's a little bit. I actually would have expected that the build out or more private offices would have been more of a trend than it is. The growing trend has actually been to still have a good amount of cube spaces, but have your employees work from home 1 week on, 1 week off, or every other day, 2 days on, 2 days off. So you actually have 2 employees working out of the same cube and just alternating days. So you actually, you gain some efficiencies there. So the private office thing, I don't think it's actually really going to catch on because of how expensive construction costs are and how ridiculously high these tenant improvement costs are. So those deals just don't really pencil, and I don't think they ever will pencil. So I think the layout of the space will stay pretty similar, but the way that people use that space is going to change and already really has.
And what are you seeing from a lender perspective, if anything, regarding the office spaces?
Yeah.
Are they being tentative?
Yeah. Yes, but they're still happy to lend money. It just becomes a little bit more difficult to get a loan. So for example, if you were able to achieve a 75% loan to value on an investment property, now you're probably getting 65% loan to value. So you have to show up with more money to get a little bit more, so the lender has a little bit more security. Everything is more highly scrutinized, so longer lease terms. If you have a lease rolling in the next 2 years, the lender is really not giving you any credit for that income. So they're basically viewing that space as vacant. So the lender is super involved in the rent roll, literally down to every single space in the building, really 500 square feet and up. So it's more scrutinized. You've got to have deeper pockets. And where we're really seeing the most hit is that there's really no risk being taken. So you can easily go out and still get a loan on a stabilized product, and that interest rate is going to be awesome. You're in the high 2s to mid 3s. But where we're seeing lenders completely not even touch product is in sort of the value add sector, which obviously comes along with a lot of risk. So you're looking at buying a 50 to 70% occupied building, you put some capital in it, you lease it up. The lenders don't really want any part of that right now, because the lease time looks like it might be 3 years instead of 1. The tenant market is now 1 tenant. Maybe we're getting 1 new tenant a month instead of 4 new tenants a month in the market. So everything is just run a lot thinner. But there's not a lot of lenders that won't lend. So I'd say cautiously optimistic.
Sure, sounds good. And Vanessa, I want to ask you that same question. What are you seeing in industrial as far as lending goes? Is it still strong?
It is now. When COVID first hit, there were a lot of people doing speculative deals. And if they were outside the core market, let's call that 5 to, Linwood, that's, east side, let's call it your core market, you could probably still pick up speculative financing. If you were south of that or outside what they consider to be the core markets, it was very tough for even the largest developers to get speculative financing. So I had one deal fall apart because they just couldn't get it through their lending criteria the way that they wanted it underwritten. And we turned around and put that property under contract to another developer, but that was something that probably lasted through the middle of the summer, and then it started to come back. And the demand for industrial has pushed that confidence in the lender's market. So on owner users, I'm not seeing a real challenge. I think the same things that Drew said is that they really look at you and your financial capacity, especially if you're buying as an investor. And if you lose a tenant, can you cover that vacancy without a lot of trouble? So that's what we're seeing. It's been pretty strong.
Good. I'm going to stay with you for just a second. I want to know a little bit from all of you, though, how have you kind of pivoted to keep your business going during this time? How have things changed for you?
Do you want to start with me?
Mm-hmm.
So in April, when everybody had to go home, that was very, very difficult. So what happened was, for me, you focused on your core transactions, the transactions that were happening now, the ongoing business that you had that needed to get completed. You reached out to landlords. If you're a leasing agent like I am, you reached out to your landlords to find out how they were going through all this, and you really I would say that everything that wasn't absolutely essential went by the wayside, and you focused in, you tried to get a handle on where your business was going, and nobody knew for a long time. And then we really worked on getting our brokers back into our office under the COVID rules when we could move back in and be more productive. I would say that it still, though, is carrying through with non-essential items are not getting paid attention to as much as they used to be. So.
Yeah. And Carrie, how about you? How have you had to change the way that you go about it?
Yeah, I think kind of back to what Vanessa was saying is just being more present with your clients, collaborating with not just your clients, but with other brokers throughout the state that have landlords throughout the country. What are other people doing? How are they working with their tenants? I mean, this has been the most collaborative relationships as far as landlord tenants. What can we do to keep our tenants here? So it's a different, as I was saying earlier, like I'm just as busy as I was now. It's just a different kind of busy. So instead of doing leasing, I'm doing creative thinking, and I'm a counselor, and I'm a sounding board, and I'm okay, how are we gonna get over this obstacle? Things that you've never seen before. So it's been interesting, just a lot more collaborative approach. First Western, our whole thought process is relationship based, and how can we benefit our clients, and how can we provide that? And I feel like we just have gone above and beyond to be present and to work with our clients. We're part of a group called Realty Resources, and that has offices throughout the whole nation. And we've been able to get on conference calls with them and just take that time to learn what other people are doing. And as I mentioned earlier, using social media, I have really changed my business and have been trying to be more present on so many different platforms that typically you don't find commercial real estate agents. You find residential, they're all over, the abundance of them. but typically you don't see that. So I have used Instagram to find tenants and messaged them that way and like, hey, are you expanding? And finding out how they've been productive throughout this and how they've changed their model. So I've definitely changed how I've been looking at things and how I can grow. I focused a lot just on personal development and where I want my business to go and what kind of clients I want to work with. So it's definitely giving you that time to slow down and think, what direction do I want to go and who do I want to be as a broker? So it's been interesting.
Great, thank you. And Will, how about you? How have you pivoted during this time?
Yeah, well, echoing both Vanessa and Carrie, those are great things to hear from both of you. I'd say that the team here, Drew and myself, we actually just kind of went back to square one, like as if we were brand new day one in the business, and we went through our entire process to make sure we weren't missing a segment of the market we weren't reaching out to, or letting some things fall through the cracks. Because when the last few years we've been so busy, it's almost like you have tunnel vision, because you walk in every day and you could spend 12 hours a day working on all the active deals that are a little bit easier to get done and things of that nature. So when things slowed down, it allowed you to kind of retrace your steps, retrace your process, even your day-to-day process, and how your day is structured. And so I think that's been really beneficial. I think there's definitely a silver lining to all this. And echoing both their points, we're definitely still as busy. I would definitely consider myself a consultant or a counselor more than I ever have, which is great experience to learn and a good opportunity to kind of prove to yourself, to your clients, that you're more than just a broker, that you're someone that's actually watching out for them. Because I mean, our world was changed, but our clients' worlds were completely thrown for a loop. So it's allowed them to kind of trust you on more of a personal level, which will help our business last longer into the future.
Great, thank you. And Carrie, I'm going to go back to you and talk a little bit more about retail. So in the South Sound and the Tacoma area, there's been a lot going on around the Tacoma Mall area.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything that you would be able to share with us in regards to those properties?
So the Tacoma Mall redevelopment is still on. It's on pause. From what I understand, Marcus Theaters is still moving forward. Rack's still moving forward, as is Total Wine and More and Ulta. Everything is on pause. They were set to deliver October of this year, October, November. The construction as of right now is set to start back up the beginning of next year, with hopes to deliver August 2021, or fall time, August 2021. I'm hopeful that will still continue. The theater, obviously, I don't know how that's going to play out, because theaters can't be open, but Total Wine and More has probably done the most business they've ever done, because everybody needs alcohol right now. So that's positive. Nordstrom's, Rack, other discount brands, they're going forward. They're very strong. Nordstrom's isn't doing that well, but as the Rack and their discounter, they're still strong. Ulta, they've been able to pivot and right off the bat did the curbside model. And so I'm hopeful that those tenants will continue to move forward, and the construction will start in the first quarter 2021. As far as the smaller shop buildings that are on the side where Sears used to be, those are probably going to be a year or two out. They are doing some pre-leasing, but I don't think they'll break ground on those probably before a year or two. So.
Great, thank you. And then I want to know if any of you, and I think this might be to you, Will, regarding the Tacoma Dome and kind of what's happening with the properties around there, and if you know anything about, what the Tacoma Dome is kind of planning.
Yeah, definitely. So spoke to a couple people at the Economic Development Board and at the city over the last 2 weeks in anticipation of this call. I hadn't heard anything from the Tacoma Dome, and probably it might have been even the last 9 months to a year. So the updates that I gathered was that the actual Tacoma Dome itself, they're booking events, concerts, events, what have you. Obviously, those are going to be held with more precaution than ever. And then the most interesting piece is the RFP that the city of Tacoma sent out on the neighboring 10 acres, which is the parking lot next door to the Tacoma Dome. And if you guys all remember, about a year ago, Topgolf had submitted a proposal on that piece and actually won the opportunity. And the city of Tacoma is still in active discussions / negotiations with Topgolf. Both sides want it to happen. The timing was obviously about as terrible as it could have been. So it's going to take longer than expected. City of Tacoma, for example, if Topgolf did not happen, they still would want this to become more of an entertainment district. So it would resubmit an RFP out to the public with the hope that it stays within the entertainment realm, opposed to going to, say, a commercial office building. But all in all, they're pushing along, and that Topgolf project would be extremely cool to see driving by on I-5. Between that and Emerald Queen, we're going to look like quite a big city down here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Will. So I know a lot of people, especially down here in Tacoma, there's a few restaurants especially that have, kind of vacated recently, which would be, Pacific Grill and the Swiss having to close, and they're kind of staples in the downtown area. And then Carrie, this is probably to you, and Will and Vanessa, if you have anything to share, please don't hesitate to chime in here. But I know people are chomping at the bit to know, what kind of tenants are we going to get back into those places? Have you guys heard of anything? Are there restaurants out there still looking for space?
Mm-hmm. So I surprisingly have not seen a lot of restaurants closing. I have probably 45 plus listings. I don't have a single restaurant in my portfolio that has closed because of COVID. The Swiss, I work on the University of Washington Tacoma campus portfolio. So the Swiss, they were for sale before COVID. The sale fell through because of COVID when the buyers backed out. But a lot of these tenants that are closing were tenants that were already looking to retire or get out of the business. And then they took this as an opportunity, just good time to close. As far as Pacific Grill, I don't really know the whole story there, but that's, as far as shenanigans goes as well, a lot of these concepts were already facing closure. So yes, I think that there are a ton of restaurants looking. I would say 75% of the tenants that I'm working with right now are looking for restaurants. And that is obviously most people want to drive through or, a quick takeout spot, but I also have a 5,200 square foot restaurant that I've had multiple offers on. So people aren't scared of the full sit down restaurant. They know it's going to take some time to recover from this, and they aren't sure when they can be full capacity. And so there's a lot of obstacles, but there are a lot of people, especially companies from Seattle, that want to be in Tacoma. So, the Swiss will be interesting. The university dabbled with the idea of just redeveloping that and, putting student housing or more classrooms, but they have decided to keep that commercial. They probably won't have the live music aspect just because on campus it's kind of a little interesting anyways. But they are, still going to lease that out as a retail building. So yes, I am hopeful that we will have people to backfill those restaurants. I think that we may see more, instead of just a full restaurant, maybe more entertainment component, similar to like a Flat Stick, for example, where it's a big restaurant, but they also have the putt-putt and the entertainment concept. So I think people will need to be creative on how to use the larger space. But I definitely am hopeful that we'll see some restaurants come in and backfilling those.
Great, thank you. Vanessa or Will, do either of you have anything to add?
I actually had a question for Carrie. So Carrie, we're seeing all these restrictions on occupancy. So right now it's 0 indoors, but it previously was 25. Is there kind of like a threshold number that restaurateurs like to see where they feel comfortable opening their business? Like, for example, Flat Stick hasn't opened at all, and then maybe they're like, okay, we can't open until phase 4 because we need 100% capacity. Is there a number there where people feel comfortable to open on more of a broader scale?
I would say it's very just dependent on the concept and the price point. There's a lot of factors that go into that. I would say, like, for example, a flat stick, they're so large, their capacity is pretty high anyways. So, you know, 25% capacity in a building that's 7,000 square feet isn't that bad. So I wouldn't say there's an exact threshold. But the problem with the larger restaurants is you have to staff accordingly. And, you know, if you assume you're going to have, say, 25%, and then how do you actually have enough staff to provide the services that people need? And so to actually have it run right, you have to have quite a few people on staff. You have to have a busser, you have to have a receptionist or a hostess, you have to have a server and a cook. And so it's more, I think, that just plays into how many people do they actually need staffed to provide the services that customers are going to want. So I don't say that there's an exact threshold. I mean, I have a lot of people that are running on like ghost staff, like there's nobody there except the people that own the restaurant, and they don't have anybody else there. So kind of dependent on the specific restaurant and the use. I mean, like you said, right now it's 0, so sad.
Yeah, and I guess sticking with that real quick, I know this isn't on my question list, but it just made me think, you know, there are some restaurants that are putting up some tents. You know, are your tenants feeling comfortable with that? Or, you know, it seems like the city is providing space or allowing for some space. So what are you seeing with that?
I think that if they have the capacity to do that, I don't know why they wouldn't. I was actually on my way to work today and I drove by Moctezuma's, and they have that little drive-through area in front of they're actually enclosing that. So like as of today, like the half of it was enclosed because they're going to take advantage of that to provide the outdoor seating. Obviously you see a lot more tents popping up. Wooden City, Matador have provided outdoor seating. I think the problem with Washington is it's Washington. Like how long can we sit outside and not freeze? So even in an outdoor tent without the heaters or just the wind, like it's not very conducive to a relaxing environment. If you're trying to eat and then your food's cold. So, I mean, I think if people are able to provide that and they want to stay open and provide that for people, they will. It's on that note, it's just been interesting to see how people have been creative in providing takeout and how they've had to pivot their concept and, like I said, provide outdoor dining. So it'll be interesting to see. It's just unfortunate that I would say 95% of tenants don't have that as an option.
Right. So as far as commercial space goes in general, what are you guys hearing about shared commercial space, and is that changing due to some of the restrictions, or just, you know, everyone's comfort level?
One thing that I've seen, which I think is pretty cool, and it was actually already starting to trend, is ghost kitchens. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's basically like a shared kitchen or a commercial kitchen. So you'll find a lot of food trucks that use these. So everyone will just go and use the same kitchen. But what the ghost kitchens are is there's a couple bigger concepts that are coming out. But Cloud Kitchen is created by the former CEO of Uber. And then Virtual Kitchen, there's 2 Uber executives that are starting this. And then there's a new one that's going to be coming in off of Lincoln in Tacoma, where you're going to have restaurants that are going to provide takeout only. So on, you know, Uber Eats, you can go and you can order from this concept, but they're all cooking out of the same kitchen. And so it's not something that's happened really before. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop. But they don't have to have the dine-in, they don't have to pay for the restaurant space. It's going to reduce their costs. And then a lot of these are already partnered with companies like Uber, so that infrastructure is already there. So I mean, retail, it's kind of hard to share spaces, but the commercial kitchen is, I think, is pretty cool. So
yeah. Will?
Yeah, I'd say that co-working, the WeWork trend, I think that is pretty much gone by the wayside. There was a trend that was starting to pick up momentum that's just been expedited exponentially, and it's still within the co-working realm, but what it is basically it's built out private offices anywhere from, let's say, 500 to 1,500 square feet that you can rent in kind of the same form that you would a WeWork space. So you can rent it month to month, but now this office is built for you, kitchen, private offices, conference room, it's already built out up front. So the landlord's willing to deliver that 1-year lease or short-term lease. And it's built for, let's say, 3 to 6 employees that are within their own space. So like right now, my brother and I, we are like, he's sitting behind me, we're in our team office, and that we're well more than 6 feet apart. We feel comfortable in this environment. If this was a cube environment with all these other brokers, I don't think we'd get very far. But the trend has been, yes, to build out more densely populated co-work space, but within contained areas. So like Traction Space in Tacoma, they came out with that concept prior to COVID. And I think that they will do better than others. Regis, everyone was talking about Regis. Well, Regis is like a dinosaur because it's just a bunch of executive offices. No one's going to want to go into their private office. That you've got to play to the millennials and the Gen Z. They want to be in this open concept, and Regis is going to weather the storm just fine. They were built out for COVID, and years leading up to it, they looked like they were going the wrong direction. So co-working will be okay.
Awesome. Vanessa, do you have anything to share on that?
Industrial users don't share space. So
Yeah.
there's like, no.
I do see that Terry asked a question, and so, and you were nice, thank you for responding, but I'm going to go ahead and just pose it so everybody can hear your answer. But she wanted to know if we were seeing any lease rate concessions needing to be made in the industrial sector.
Well, the answer is, not really. There was a time from April through maybe middle summer where people were putting off decisions, and we were seeing a lot of short-term deals. And mostly larger tenants doing short-term deals. They needed overflow storage. They needed someplace, they needed it right now. So we did a few, some subleases and short-term deals that were a little bit off market. The tenant had to be very good quality credit in order for the landlords to want to do that. So I would say now that we are seeing a normal level of concessions. On a 5-year lease, you'll see a couple months of free rent. I'm not seeing rates step down. In fact, in your smaller spaces under 50,000 square feet, I'm seeing the rates continue to trend up. So, if you've got that size tenant, you're having a difficult time finding space for them right now. So it is very much a land seller and a landlord market right now.
Great, thank you. I don't know if any of you will really have an answer for this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And so if you don't have an answer, that's okay. But I know there's been a lot of trends in downtown, and everyone keeps asking, are we going to be adding more multifamily, especially as you kind of go up the hill towards Hilltop area? Have you guys seen any trends as far as any of those properties going up the hill there? Well,
I think it will continue to be multifamily. With that mixed use component. I think especially as the rail system goes up there and continues to grow, I think we'll continue to see the multifamily grow as well.
Yeah, agreed. Multifamily is probably the right use, but another component to that is the land costs. Land costs are skyrocketing and really only justify a multifamily development. Like if you went in and tried to build a commercial office building, you would have to get downtown Seattle rates. That's just not achievable. The multifamily downtown or close in is, I think, going to be monumentally positive change for downtown Tacoma. Just getting bodies down here, I think, is really important. I think the coolest project of all of them is actually the Unico project at the Washington building on 10th and Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally downtown in the middle of the financial district. So if they can lease those like market units out at the projected rents they're hoping for, which is basically going to be the high water mark for Tacoma. If people are excited about living in this downtown core, that's going to promote other Class C office buildings that are vacant to be renovated for multifamily, and or some of these surface lots that are, we have parking lots in the middle of downtown Tacoma. You could see those change hands to a multifamily developer, and and ride the coattails of what Unico is hoping will happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's definitely a project to watch, I think, in our area. So that actually goes in well with the question that we have from the audience about what is considered maybe a mass exodus from Seattle due to COVID, and then also the work from home changes. Do you think that the South Sound market is actually going to gain in activity because of that?
Yes, I do. The housing is down here is continuing to be in high demand. There's very limited inventory because everyone's from Seattle is moving out of Seattle into the suburbs. So for retail, we're finding that there's still that demand for grocery anchored centers. People want services where they are. People are working from home. They want more options for lunch. They want more options for just basic services. So we're still extremely busy in those markets. And I think we're going to continue to see growth in the suburbs. Urban areas, I'm obviously a little bit more concerned about, but yes, I mean, as people continue to move down here, we're going to see a lot more demand in the suburbs and grocery anchored centers.
Absolutely. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say the mass exodus is a little bit dramatized. I'd say that it's more of a leak of tenants from Seattle, Bellevue, and even Portland to Tacoma. Instead of a tenant saying, okay, I want out of Seattle, that's just completely move our whole operation to Tacoma. What you're seeing is a downsize in their downtown core Seattle location and an expansion into the Tacoma market. So they still have multiple offices, but they might take half the space in Seattle, and then they might take, a 10 to 15 person office in Tacoma, because what they already have is they already have a built-in office in place. It's the employees that are driving to Tacoma, Seattle every day. So they already have the employees to fill the space that they're going after, so they can be pretty confident and aggressive in the space they're taking down. I mean, REI, for example, they committed to 400,000 feet in Bellevue, and they are switching their model. So they're going to most likely take something like 50,000 feet in Redmond and 100,000 feet in Renton. So they're moving out of the core, and there's not really an exodus from Bellevue. That's a one-off. But there is this scenario or this theme where instead of one downtown core Seattle office, you have 2 or 3 satellite offices up and down I-5, anywhere from Olympia up through to Bellevue and up into Bothell too. Bothell is seeing similar growth that Tacoma is seeing.
Yeah. And Vanessa, I know that's been a trend for a while in industrial, just due to space. Has that been picking up more?
What we're seeing in industrial is we're seeing the tenant footprint get larger for the large e-commerce tenants. And so in order to find the land, they're now having to really stretch themselves out of the core. And so if you think about the core being, let's call it Fife to Linwood, Bellevue, there's, the developers were grabbing up everything that they could build on, 5 acres and up, and there's really very little of it left. But if you needed 20 acres or 30 acres, you could still find some things in Thurston County, up in Snohomish County, and in South Pierce County. And now all of that land has been absorbed. So what's happening is that they're pushing even further out. So you're starting to see developers and users look at North Snohomish, the Arlington, Marysville area where, nobody really went up there before because it wasn't really the right distribution location on the correct side of the city and too far from the ports. But now they're going up there. There was a large Amazon center built up there recently. You're seeing last mile delivery take down very large sites. We're just selling 40 acres for last mile delivery. They'll do a very small building, and the rest of it will be all parking for that last mile delivery. And that's near Frederickson on the South Hill, very high density rooftop location. And you're seeing large spaces taken down by retailers that normally would have had a third-party logistics company handle their work, but now they're doing it themselves. And so what we're seeing is not a flight from the core, but we're seeing an expansion because you've got to go that far to find the land. The other thing that we're seeing that's been an interesting change in our market is the change in the shape and the size of the building versus the land. So because everybody's sort of moving into the e-commerce, we're seeing buildings require much more trailer parking, many more dock doors, which shrinks the coverage on the property of that building, which, you know, puts that land cost in your project very high. So it's not really a flight from anywhere. It's just going where you can find the product that you need. And seeing a lot more e-commerce from private companies come to the market. A very interesting one was a company called Snow Joe that just came into the market. They weren't in our state at all. They're a vendor of Home Depot, and they just took down 600,000 square feet in Lacey. And they just, you know, their first step into our state. So that's very interesting to see them take down. I mean, normally they probably would have gone into Kent Valley and taken down 200,000 square feet and called it good, but now they make a big bold move like that, you know, with Lowe's taking down 1.2 million square feet in Winlock, of all places. That's a really long ways away from even your ports. So to see them take that much space in a very centralized multi-state location is what that does for them. But they had to go that far to actually build 1 million square feet, because there really is, you know, with our urban growth boundaries and the areas that are outside the urban growth boundaries, especially as you get south of Thurston County, there's very, very limited locations where these people can locate a facility. So that's kind of our, you know, flight from or flight to.
Right. Thanks, Vanessa.
Kind of touch on Vanessa's e-commerce comment. On the retail side, groups that are traditional e-commerce, Amazon, Tesla, Warby Parker, you're starting to see them still find the need for brick and mortar spaces. Amazon, you know, Go is coming out. There's multiple locations that are popping up. The Amazon actual rumors of a grocery store being developed, not just the Go. So it's interesting that even though they're traditionally 100% e-commerce, you're starting to see that they're even finding the need and to have that physical presence. And so they're very active in the market right now, Amazon, as most people know. And so it's interesting to see how they, even in this current environment, are finding the value in a physical presence. So.
Great, thank you. An audience question here. They're looking for any comments on hospitality projects, new construction, or anything scheduled to come. Anybody have any info?
Well, I know the hotel in Tacoma should have been done. And, obviously, it was slowed down for COVID. I mean, that would be the newest project in downtown Tacoma. And I believe they should be opening soon. I'm assuming
they opened yesterday.
There we go. Soon enough. So it'll be interesting to see how they do, just given that the university, the presence is down and the conventions are down. So hopefully they do well. I have heard that Pierce County was actually one of the highest in hotel stays over the last quarter. So kind of interesting since we're at the hot spot of COVID. So
it's interesting. Another audience question. It says, although we've seen a slowdown in acquisition and disposition transactions in most or all product types, the prices appear to be staying strong. As we continue to work through COVID, do you see pricing holding, increasing, or do you think there'll be a pullback?
So I'll touch on just lease rates versus acquisition dispositions, but lease rates, I haven't seen any flux in that yet. I have yet to reduce any asking rents. If anything, they're holding strong, of maybe even going up because of the demand in certain markets, like I was mentioning before, that people weren't able to get into. Now that there is vacancy there, they are going to ask top dollar. Landlords are being more creative to get the deals done as far as allowing more time for free rent period at the beginning, which I think is kind of balancing out them being able to leave the rent where it's at. Some landlords are offering a reduced rent for the first year, and then it's going to jump up back up to market rent. So I have not seen that. And again, that's before the second closure. So we'll see how that continues to trend. But as of right now, I'm feeling pretty positive that we'll continue to stay pretty level.
I would say,
Well, go ahead, Vanessa.
in the industrial side, we have not seen a slowdown in acquisition. The buyers, let's say owner user buyer, we have a couple of those people. They're, if they need to buy something, they need to move pretty quickly and get it closed. They need to come to the table completely pre-qualified and ready to close in under 60 days, 45 days, that type of time frame. And prices are trending up. So if they find a good deal, they better grab it and take it and close on it. And I see that continuing. As far as like a completed investment deal, I see the demand to be very, very strong. Where we see a lot of our trading going on is institutional developers putting up buildings, packaging and selling to institutional investors, and then institutional investors trading those portfolios, and the cap rates keep getting more and more and more compressed. So I don't see any slowdown in that. The only thing that might slow us down is the cost of construction, as we're running into, you know, to build a shell building now. The last bid I saw for 140,000 square feet was $185 a square foot. That was all in land, soft costs, hard costs, lending fees, leasing up costs, everything. Those are huge prices to have to then turn around and lease out. So, but there seems to be a big demand. And the only place where I've seen any kind of rejection of an asset that's being offered is where you don't have the quality tenants. So quality tenancy is very important in all of that mix.
Great, thank you. Will?
Yeah, so on the acquisition and disposition, in my world, there's two type of assets: value add and stabilized. And stabilized transactions, we're doing a deal that will hopefully close next week. It'll be the highest, or I guess lowest cap rate of all time for that market, and highest per square foot. So if the product is stabilized on the long term, and located well, it is trading at all-time highs still. Now, so I would say my crystal ball would be Class A product will continue to do well, because most Class A product is owned by landlords that have deeper pockets, can carry the building if they start losing tenants, and usually have longer term leases with strong credit tenants that are going to be paying the rate. The landlords, ownership groups that are going to be hurting the most are Class C buildings and or poorly located buildings. So if you're a few blocks off the beaten path, those tenants might be, I'd say, Class C or shorter term lease in nature, and smaller groups. So those tenants are going to your co-working group. So they're working from home. They're just cutting up their lease and walking away. So the tenants are more important now than ever within your building, because people will pay for a quality tenant. But if you're in a Class C building, you likely don't have the Class A tenant. And you're also usually privately held, because that ownership group is maybe a high net worth individual or a partnership, and the asset's usually smaller because it was easier to buy for obviously cheaper. So those groups and those sellers will be the ones that will be affected, and that's where you might see deals. It just depends on the flip side, is there investors that are willing to take a risk on maybe poorly located or formerly Class C product? Are they willing to buy a 50-60% vacant building with all that lease up risk, all the money that you have to put into it up front, hoping that tenants will come back to the market? So you won't see like a mass exodus, or in 21, you're not going to see a ton of product just dump online that's well below what it was. It's going to be product that probably already was headed down that path. It's just expedited.
Gotcha. So we only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to encourage the audience, if you have a question, please get it typed in real quick for us so that we can get to it. And then I'm just going to pose these questions to all of you, and you can answer. I'm going to give you two to choose from. I either want to know what you're most excited about that's happening in Tacoma right now, like is there a project that you're most excited about, or through all of COVID, what is giving you the most hope right now? And Vanessa, we'll start with you.
So what am I most excited about? What was the second half?
You can either answer what you're most excited about or what's really giving you hope right now through COVID.
Well, you know, I'm excited that when COVID came in, that it gave the industrial side another boost in the arm, because I was wondering how long could that huge demand go, and we weren't sure. You know, we were starting to see a lot of overbuilding come on the market, and then COVID hit, and wow, everything went to warehousing. I would like to be able to find more land we're running out of land, seriously. They always say that and then they develop more, but in some of the jurisdictions, we really are running out of land. So I'm hoping I find a jurisdiction that'll help us rezone some properties and, work with those jurisdictions to help place some of this demand that's coming in. I think that it'll be very interesting with the new administration coming in to see how climate change affects what we're going to do on buildings and building practices and energy code. I'm a little nervous about that because that can make big dollar changes in your new construction. And Will, this is a question for you. Do you see it affecting existing buildings?
Not too
Or is
much.
it too early to tell?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably too early to tell. I mean, you'd be naive if you say what didn't affect, it isn't going to affect in the future, but as of right now, not really. I guess to answer one of your two questions, Natalie, I'm definitely most excited about the opportunity or the potential of Amazon coming into town. They have been rumored for quite some time now to be taking a run at a substantial amount of office space in the downtown. That would be the greatest thing to happen to Tacoma probably before I was born. It'd be a monumental change on many levels. Residential market would skyrocket. I guess that's a blessing and a curse. But the tail that Amazon would bring into the market is probably the most exciting. So what vendors come to serve Amazon retail and both other office users. So as there's an exodus out of Seattle and there's all this doom and gloom about COVID, I mean, we're sitting here in Tacoma and we're thinking, okay, well, if Amazon makes this move, it's going to be a completely different marketplace than what it was. I mean, our rents can increase overnight, and that's a good thing. Honestly, downtown Tacoma's rents have been suppressed for a long time. They've been within $5 of probably the same rate for the last 20 years. And what that would do, it would promote development. Reason why no buildings have been built since Columbia Bank built Center in 2001 is because the rents are half of what they need to be to justify building a building. So if Amazon lands, I mean, you actually could look at a different skyline in the next several years. So that's kind of like the pie in the sky, but there's some truth to that. I mean, look what they've done in other markets. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you. And Carrie, real quickly, because we're just about out of time.
Okay, so I would say just growth in the South Sound. Just the creativity that we're seeing in tenants and how they are pivoting and what they're doing to get creative, and just the sign of the tenants that are still actively growing, the QSRs, the drive-through concepts, the medical, the grocery. There's still so many active tenants out there. I mean, you have grocery outlet, Amazon, Met Market, PCC, so many grocery concepts, banks, QSRs, Dairy Queen, Burger King, Habit Burger. There's so many concepts that are out there growing. So that makes me hopeful to know that growth is still there. And then to, the mass exodus of Seattle, I think we're going to start seeing so much more concepts come out of the Seattle market down to the South Sound as well. So it's exciting.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you all, Vanessa, Carrie, and Will. Thank you so much for your time today and being on this panel. And again, I just want to do a little quick shout out to our cruise sponsors. We couldn't do these events without you. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.